Welcome to another episode of Johnny Tuck Sports. Today is going to be a little bit different today. I'm going to talk about one story from each sport that I put out in a poll last week, around last Friday. Now, there was a total of 43 votes. Now, it was pretty close. The MLB won by 27% of the vote. Then tied for second was college basketball and NBA with 26% of the vote. And then NHL had 21% of the vote. But the NHL was kind of leading on early in the poll. College basketball was leading all throughout the weekend. Then the MLB made a late push earlier today. So I'm going to talk about a story from college basketball, NBA, NHL, and MLB. I'm going to start with something that happened in the NFL last night. It's that Calvin Johnson, also known as Megatron, announced his retirement last night. Which for some fans, it's kind of heartbreaking, especially for the people in Detroit. Because that was basically the face of their franchise. But what this does now for the Lions is don't be surprised if they draft a wide receiver early on in the draft this season. And this could be Matthew Stafford's last season in Detroit as well. Because according to some people, Calvin Johnson is the only reason why Matthew Stafford is still in the NFL. So this next season will be a huge test for Matthew Stafford. Moving on to the NBA now. Should the Clippers trade Blake Griffin? Now, if you haven't heard, last week Blake Griffin in Toronto at a restaurant, he punched a team manager, like a coach's manager. All I know is that he punched him and he broke his right hand. He's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, in my opinion, this is just really idiotic. In my opinion, he should just be cut from the team immediately when that happened. This takes me back to earlier in the season with high school football with those 2 players from that Texas high school team that intentionally ran into a referee, which I will get to more of that later. It'll be relatable later in this show. But for right now, Blake Griffin, that was just an idiotic move on his part. And if he gets traded, I'm not going to blame the Clippers at all. Now, should they really? Here's why they probably should. As people think he's a good leader, he's not really a team player in my opinion. Because if you remember in the free agency this past summer, he went to DeAndre Jordan's house and he held him hostage because Mark Cuban was going to come talk to DeAndre Jordan. It just shows that he's just looking out for himself and he wants to win a ring. So if he wants to win a ring, he might as well just do it with the other team because, in my opinion, the Clippers are probably not going to have that. I have a feeling we get a little bit closer to the trade deadline, about 2 to 3 days. Blake Griffin will probably be traded. To which team, that is yet to be determined. Now next, this is in baseball now. Can the Chicago Cubs win the World Series this season? Now the Chicago Cubs have dominated this free agency season. But as history shows that teams that do successful in free agency don't win the World Series. But in my opinion, the Cubs have a lot of momentum after last season. And if there was a year that the Chicago Cubs can win the World Series, it will be this year in 2016. Here's why. They have a bunch of power this season by adding Zobrist, by adding Hayward, and you also have Chris Bryant out there. Probably the rising star of the Major League Baseball. There's just so many weapons on the Cubs this season. They will be no doubt a World Series contender this season. Now this is in college basketball. What teams can win March Madness? Now, this season in college basketball has been a big parody. And by parody I mean Duke is unranked. We have teams like Oklahoma and Texas A&M and Providence toward the top tier of all the teams in college basketball. This is just completely unexpected, especially with Duke being unranked for the first time in a long time. So right now I see about 20 different teams that can win this tournament. It's just that much a competitive field in college basketball this season. It's so unpredictable right now. This year's bracket is going to be very tough for me to fill out, and I will have that video up on March 14th. So mark your calendars for that day. last question is, this in the NHL, this has been the big story this past couple of days. Should Dennis Wideman be kicked out of the NHL? Now what he did is he intentionally just hit a referee right behind his back. Now here's what happened in the story. Apparently he got hit, and he wanted a penalty or something like that, and I guess the ref didn't see it, and I guess he had the attitude of, well, here, I'm going to hit you in the back and see how you feel. And right now his suspension is probably going to be for so long, but if you want my opinion, he should just be kicked out of the entire NHL altogether. There's just no room for that in this sport. Again, that just relates to the high school football thing in Texas. Those two players, not only do they get suspended from the team, but from the school, and they're probably going to be in trouble with the law. Unless that's what I think. I haven't really kept up the story after about a week into it, so comment below if you know that, even though none of you probably will. So in my opinion, the Clippers should trade Blake Griffin. The Cubs will be a contender in the World Series, which I won't say if they will win it or not. You'll have to find out in my MLB prediction video coming up the next couple weeks. Probably around a month from now, probably when we get to spring training. I see about 20 different teams that are able to win March Madness. I think Dennis Wideman should be kicked out of the NHL for that move. There's no room for that in any sport of any kind. Now thank you for watching my video. Feel free to like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.